welcome to Practical Christian Lessons. I am Joshua Pearsall, and we are returning to Why the Bible and Not the Ball Cycle. If you're new to this series, watch our first one. It's a nice essay on creation. But the premise of the series is very much looking at this very same premise. I highly recommend this book by John Oswalt, The Bible Among the Myths. And in this, Oswalt notes this shift in scholarship, where the Bible in the past wasn't viewed as it is today, where the modern thought is the Bible, from those who are skeptical in the field of scholarship, that is this evolution of thought out of the ancient Near East, that it evolved from the religions there, that it's not unique in the sense that it just came out as completely different. It is something that developed over time from what already existed, where John Oswalt points out and argues that this is a shift in ideology and philosophy, not a shift in the data. About 60 years ago, I guess it'd be about 80 years ago now, is when this shift happened in the scholarship. Data hadn't changed, but the way people looked at it was what changed. So they started focusing more on the similarities and the differences and saying these, because it shares these in common, it just developed out of history. Rather than, as Oswalt points out, if you look at the differences and how stark they are, that makes no sense. And whether or not you agree with the Bible, you can't just say it's an evolution of what was already there. It is something starkly different and unique compared to the theology of the rest of the people around them. Even from the most extreme end of skeptics in the early times, they rejected divinity, but that wasn't really a thing in the ancient Near East. It was more of like the Stoics and stuff. That's a different tangent there. And we're going to be reading from this, a series of essays from this, sort of demonstrating this, and I, of course, recommend getting Oswalt's book. He goes into depth with it as well. Going through the NIV Archaeological Study Bible and their essays that compare the ancient Near East, and so it's going to be things Egypt, Mesopotamia, and their myths with the Bible. But this is out of print and very expensive. Other good resources are going to be the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible, which you can get in other translations. This was just cheap and hardback. And then the ESV Archaeological Study Bible I have. This is a nice one. This is going to be quite expensive if you try to find this, though. But we are going to get into it. Our last essay was on creation. This one is on the serpent. Genesis 3. Throughout most of the ancient Near East, people revered and often worshipped serpents as symbols of royalty, wisdom, healing, fertility, death, and other forces, both harmful and beneficent. However, in ancient writings, serpents and serpentine creatures played their most prominent role as adversaries of both the humans and the gods. In the Egyptian myth of Osiris, the sun god Ra, sometimes spelled Re, has to contend with Apophis, a demon serpent who attempts each morning to overthrow Ra and thereby enfold the world in darkness. Consequently, Egyptian texts like Pharaoh's enemies to Apophis, thus calling down curses upon their heads. The snake of the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh is somewhat reminiscent of the serpent in Genesis 3, in that it deprives the hero Gilgamesh of immortality. When Gilgamesh is bathing in a pond, a serpent robs him of the plant of rejuvenation, which, if eaten, would have granted him eternal life. The serpent devours the plant and is rejuvenated as it sheds its old skin. Gilgamesh, however, is consigned to die as a mortal. Serpents similarly oppose humans and gods in the other Mesopotamian stories, such as the Etana myth, Enuma Elish, and Inanna and the Halupa tree. In the Ugarit's Baal-Anat cycle, Baal and his consort Anat defeat the seven-headed twisting serpent Latan. The word Latan is related to Leviathan, which is crushed by God in the Bible in Psalm 74:14, the time of creation, but prophesied to reassert itself temporarily during the end times, Isaiah 27:1. To see a discussion of God's dealing with a similar monster, Rahab, in Job 9:13, 26:12, Psalm 89:10, and Isaiah 51:9. The serpent of Genesis 3 plays an adversarial role, as do those in other ancient Near Eastern literature, but it is simply introduced as one of the creatures the Lord God had made. God the Creator is omnipotent. His purposes cannot be thwarted by any creature. Although the serpent or sea monster motif of the Bible reflects the fact that the Bible writers incorporated well-known images from the ancient world into their writings, other biblical material clearly demonstrates that these inspired authors did not accept the mythology behind the Mesopotamian or Egyptian stories. In the text for this, if you're interested relating directly to the serpent, it's going to be Genesis 3:1 through 15. I'm just going to walk through it. This is a common text, even among secular worlds. The serpent is, of course, portrayed as one of the creatures, one of the beings within creation. It, unlike in the Gilgamesh myth, it tricks the humans. It deceives Eve into eating an apple by getting her to disobey one of the Lord's commands. Adam then partakes of the fruit. Then the curse is uttered upon them. And the first prophecy in the Bible is here. It is, "Cursed are you above all livestock and all the wild animals," talking to the serpent. "You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all of the days of your life, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." And of course, there are quite a few similarities that were noted, but also look at those stark differences. Now, they mention here the serpent is just portrayed as part of creation. That's true. And of course, this in Second Temple literature as well becomes to be understood, not just in Christianity, but in ancient Jewish literature, comes to be understood as the Satan, the adversary, which we in Christianity call the devil. And so it's important to understand, right, this isn't just a serpent. And everyone who says the ancient people didn't think that, well, serpents didn't just talk. The ancient people weren't dumb, no matter how many people try to say that on the internet. They know that serpents don't talk, that they're going around crawling on their belly, not saying human words. They're aware there is something different about this serpent. It is not just a regular natural serpent. That's why it ends up developing so much in Second Temple literature. But the important thing to note here, right, the serpent here is not an adversary that the Lord has to worry about. He is a being that the Lord not quite tosses aside, but pretty easily handles, and is not this thing that threatens a deity at the beginning of every day to consume creation. It doesn't eat this fruit of rejuvenation and become this new being. In fact, it's the opposite. It's cursed and made weaker. And I think that differences are obvious enough there. And I should have said this in the beginning, but we're going to do this now. Anyone who's wondering kind of what the series is about, it's for anyone interested in looking into the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament. For those like myself who always are happy to learn more in defending it, which is why I highly recommend this book. You can get this for pretty cheap. I mean, you can tell this one's pretty beat up. I got it used. But I got it for $5. This is one of my textbooks for my class. It's great. You can find it on EBSCO and JSTOR if you have access to those. Great resource. Highly recommend it. And this is also for those who are wondering if it's true, who are wanting to look into the cases for it, right? If the case I'm presenting in this series is true, that it is truly unique, it didn't just arise out of what was already there, you then have to ask, okay, why did this story arise? Where did it come from? I'm going to argue for divine revelation, that it is so unique and utterly different from the world around it that there's no way these people just made it up on their own. And when you look at how Israel rose, right, it was a bunch of slaves from Egypt. And even if you dismiss the Exodus narrative, you still have to explain how a bunch of people who are noted as wanderers and nomads in I believe it's it's one of the ancient steles. I'll find a link to it and put an article to that in below in the comments. And they're called the nomads. They're wanderers, right? How did a bunch of nomads suddenly rise up to power and overthrow one of the most powerful empires in human history? At the very least of the ancient Near East, but it was an extremely powerful empire in throughout the Canaanite land. Right? They didn't just do that on their own. They weren't better warriors. They weren't more equipped. Someone or something, God, had to help them. And John Oswalt goes over that as well. And he goes over tons of other things, like how these people came to such complex ideas when they likely didn't have the same religious education that many other people did. and he points to critiques of sort of the documentary hypothesis in as much as the revision aspect that people sometimes try to bring up, where the whole ancient writing, the Old Testament, was revised later by others and changed. He still points out you still have two problems with that. One, they appealed to an older tradition, and that was pretty clear. It had to come from somewhere. And two, you still have, all you've done is kicked back the problem of these people having this new theology that is so starkly different from everyone around them. It still had to come from somewhere. You still don't solve the question there. That is still there. Where did this theology, this idea of God as one, as there being a single Lord of all, not a pantheon, of humans being valued beings created in the image of God rather than just servants barely better than trash and feces? Where did these ideas come from? Because it didn't come from the people around them. They have a unique view on history. There's so much. Again, this book, so good. I cannot recommend it enough. But I will end it there. I could go on for a very long time. This is something we'll be going on for a long time. Why the Bible and not the Ball cycle, and going through these various myths. And I will have links to a few other helpful things related to the same topic. There is James Michael Smith of Disciple Dojo did a reading through of some of the ancient texts. I believe it was from the Ball cycle. And I'll grab links to those. They were great to listen to. And you'll see a lot of similarities. The ancient biblical authors used the same imagery as a polemic against the people around them to demonstrate to them, hey, here's what's true about reality. Here's what you think it is. Here's what's actually going on. And it is important to understand that and to look into that. And look into those arguments, both as skeptics and believers. We need to understand this and see this and look at the data. And I'll try and grab some other helpful links for the series. I'll put it in this one. I'll go pin them on the first one. Feel free to direct people to this series who are wanting to learn how to defend the Old Testament, who are wanting to look into studying the Old Testament and see the truth that is there. So with that, you guys go in peace. Have a wonderful day. God bless.